Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing my version of a graduated bob. You can also call it like a swing bob or stack bob. So I prepared my mannequin with some after party smoothing cream, and I am going to part her with a profile, a broken profile. So we're going to go to about the top of the crown. Then I'm going to go from the radial to the top of the ear. So I'm going to isolate the front from the back. Anytime we are doing anything with graduation, we are talking about a 45-degree angle. So just remember that 45 degrees is going to create graduation, 0 degrees is going to create maximum weight, and then 90 degrees is going to create some kind of a layering pattern. So now I have my two front sections isolated from the back. I'm going to continue with my profile parting all the way down to the nape, making sure I'm centered. Pass me 2 more clips, Sarah, please. The gold clips. So my first parting in section I'm going to start out with is 2 diagonal forwards from the occipital bone down to the bottom of the ear. So just remember, the steeper you take your diagonal forwards, the more asymmetry you will have in the front. So you can kind of customize it. If we are working with a parting that's very steep, then it's going to have a lot of swing in the front, in a sense of more of a disconnection. But if we use something softer, more of a rounded diagonal forward, it's going to have a softer effect. So I'm going to go kind of right in the middle. So like I said, I'm working from my occipital bone to the bottom of my ear. I'm going to pin all this hair up that I'm not using right now. So I'm a little bit steeper on this side. I'm going to go ahead and correct that really quick. There we go. Now I'm more symmetrical. So whenever I'm creating a guide for my graduated bob, I'm going to start with the center vertical section in the middle. Some people like to go in and cut the baseline right away. You can do that if you want. I like to go ahead and create my guide with my center vertical section. And then I'll go through and create my baseline. So I'm going to go through and take my center vertical section, no wider than the width of your comb. So I'm going to lower my mannequin a little bit. And we're going to be working 90 degrees. Then I'm going to elevate to 45. And then I'm going to be point cutting. Decreasing in length. So that's going to be my guide for pretty much the rest of the haircut. So once I create my guide, I'm going to be working with pivoting sections. I'm pivoting from the inside of this section. So I'm going to take my first pivot, second pivot, and then release my third. So my first pivot is going to start about right here. Comb all this hair out of the way. Try to work with clean subsections and partings. Point cutting still, decreasing in length. Take my next pivot section, my last pivot section. So I'm starting to build a nice amount of graduation through there. Now I'm going to start on my right side. I'm still taking pivot sections. Start with my first pivot section, comb all this hair out of the way. That way you can focus on your subsection. We're still at 45 degrees and I'm point cutting, decreasing in length. Pivot. Guys, I just want to tell y'all there's no right or wrong way to do a graduated bob. I just do it this way because I know that this works for me. And you can also customize this to whatever length you're wanting or effect you're wanting. So don't feel like there's a correct way or a wrong way to do a graduated bob. Like I said, this just works for me. So I'm going to go through and cross-check my sides. Now I'm going to go through and clean up my baseline. So I'm going to go through and I'm working comb. I'm trying to get that hair as close to natural as fall as possible. So I have it almost pressed up against the neck using the back of my blade on my shears. And so I'm just going to go through and just start cleaning up that bottom. Great, so this is gonna be my guide for the rest of the haircut. So I'm gonna continue working with about 1.5 inch diagonal forward subsections, and I'm gonna be pivoting within those subsections until I reach the top of the radial. Okay, so I'm gonna still be pivoting. I'm gonna start on my right side first, or left side first. Pivoting at 45 degrees. You can also twist that hair to keep it out of your way. Take my next pivot. The reason why I like working with pivots, it's because you have more control, and so it's gonna be a little bit more accurate outcome. You also won't have to do so much texturizing at the very end. And then I'm gonna release my last pivot section. So I'm gonna start on my right side. I like to work side by side. So now I'm at 45 degrees. On the opposite side of the head, I'm gonna turn her around here. continue with my second to last set of diagonal forwards. Still continuing pivoting. So I'm on this side, the left side of the head. I'm gonna be pivoting still. Turn her around here. Still maintaining a 45 degrees. A big mistake that a lot of people make whenever they are cutting something with graduation is they want to tend to drop it really low. So then you start creating more weight than you do graduation. So just make sure you're maintaining a 45 degrees. 45 degrees is anywhere between 90 degrees, which is here, and 0 degrees, which is down there. So it's somewhere right in the middle. So before you cut, maybe comb a couple of sections, get comfortable with working at a 45, and then you can go ahead and start cutting. So I'm going to switch her over to the right side so you can see the right side again. I'm still working with pivot sections, combing this hair out of the way because I know I'm not using that hair. And I'm still at a 45 degree angle, following my guideline. Take my last pivot. So I'm just gonna kind of stop right here and cross check, make sure I'm even on both sides. Everything's looking pretty good. So I'm gonna drop the last part in the back that's at the radial and then just continue to pivot. So I'm gonna turn her back this way so you can see the left side. And we are still working at a 45 degree angle, point cutting. Switch it to the right side. Still pivoting. So the back is created. I created a very subtle graduation at the bottom. So now I'm gonna connect the front to the back now. So I'm gonna start on the right side right here. Whenever I'm working with connecting a graduated bob, You always want to try to connect it to the baseline of the back part. Let me show you real quick. So if we are trying to connect it, I want it to connect to this part right here. So we're going to be working with pivoting subsections in the front. And so I don't know if you can see it, I hope you can, but our guide that we're going to be following is the one that we created in the back right here with our graduation. So I'm still gonna continue to point cut, and I'm holding that at a very low elevation, right in between 0 and 45. And then I'm just gonna be point cutting that very softly, connecting it to the back of the haircut. So one thing to keep in mind whenever you're doing a graduated bob, you can kind of customize this to however long you want to keep it in the front. If you want to keep it really long in the front, you can over direct this really far back, and I can show you real quick. I'm going to go ahead and do that, demonstrate that for you. So we're going to over direct this hair really far back, and we're going to connect it to the back right here. Still connecting. And whenever I let it go, it's going to create a long swing. I don't really like that, but some people do. So I'm just going to connect it classically. So I'm just slightly over directing it back, very slight. And then just over directing that back and connecting it to the back of the baseline of the graduation. So we have just a nice connection right through there. So I'm just going to continue working with pivot sections in the front of the head. Drop my last section. If you ever get lost, what you can do is take the section that you're cutting, lift up, and your guide's right there every single time. So the right side's done there. So we have a nice graduation connected into a little bit of a swing in the front. So I'm going to go ahead and do the left side for you. Once again, we are connecting the front to the bottom of this baseline right through here. So I'm going to be still working with the same partings, pivoting sections. So now I'm going to stand over on this side, and I'm working with my pivot section connecting it. So my guide is, I'm actually going to put this here so you can see it. My guide's right there, so I'm just following that guide. Point cutting still. Not over directing it too much, but just connecting it to the back of our baseline. Take my next pivot section. our last pivot section. So there's that side. We have a nice graduation in the back, right through here, and it's connected into a swing in the front. The good thing about these is if you do keep it swung a little bit, we as humans have a tendency to hold our head up. So if let's say you had a client that held their head up while they were walking, it would look almost more like a classic bob versus like a graduated bob. And obviously when they look down, that swing gets a little bit more dramatic. So that's the reason why I like to kind of keep it longer in the front. You don't have to. Like I said, it's totally optional. One thing I am gonna do really quick is just come through the front and cross check. So we're very even on both sides. Now what I'm gonna do for y'all, just to kind of do like an example, is I'm gonna do more of like a side bang. Whenever people get bobs, I personally am not a fan of having like a super blunt straight across bang with a bob, especially if it's a graduated bob. Now classic bobs on the other hand, that's different. I love a full strung fringe with like a classic bob, but today I feel like this haircut would look better with more of a side bang. So I'm gonna be working off of the, let's say her part goes to the right side. So I'm gonna go ahead and part her hair to the right side. So a good reference point is kind of come right through the middle of the eyebrow, and that's where I would take the parting at to part it over to the right side. So whenever I'm working with a side bang, I want to still work at the drop of the apex in the front of the head. So if the apex is dropping right here, a good way to find that is to grab your comb, put that on top of the head, and then push down slightly. And where that comb starts to drop, that's where her apex is gonna be. And that would be a good reference point to start your fringe. So I'm gonna go ahead and clip all this hair back. That way I know I can see what I'm working with. And we're gonna be, like I said, we're gonna be working with more of a side swept fringe. So what I like to do is comb the hair to a very, very low elevation, working more at a natural fall, and over direct it to the opposite way of where you have the part. So if you have the part parted on the right side of the head, I want to over direct this fringe all the way to the left whenever I'm cutting those side bangs. So I'm going to over direct the hair to the opposite side of the parting, and then I'm gonna actually leave them kind of long, and then I'm just gonna point cut that out. So whenever I drop the fringe and comb it over, she has a longer side swept fringe that goes to the right. And you can also customize this too. Let's say for instance, if she wanted a really they call it like a swoop bang, or like a really brushed over shorter bang, you can go through and take your same partings, but cut asymmetrically, short going longer, and it would give it a very swoop effect. So I'm gonna keep her fringe about this long, because I feel like that's what looks appropriate with this haircut. I'm going to go ahead and get it styled for you, and then part 2 will be me personalizing it and texturizing it to remove weight and bulk, and then we'll be done. Thank you.